A few weeks ago, we asked you, our listeners, to send us questions via social media. Many of you from all over Europe have used this opportunity, and today we want to get back to you and answer your questions. We will talk about working at ECB, about the challenges central banks face in 2025 and the skills we need to tackle them, and we will discuss how central banks work together. You're listening to the ECB Podcast, bringing you insights into the world of economics and central banking. My name is Stefania Secola. With me here today in the studio are Eglantine Devaux from Human Resources and Gabriel Glöckler from the Communication Department. Welcome. Hi, Eglantine. Hi, Gabriel. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks, Stefania. Great to be back.
Yes, indeed. And before we kick it off, just a quick reminder, we always want to hear from our listeners what is that you like or don't like about the podcast. What is your favorite episode? Which topics would you like to hear more about? Let us know in the comments or send us messages on the ECB Instagram account and help us shape the podcast going forward. And please don't forget to subscribe. Let us now jump straight into some of the topics that you wanted to know more about. And the first question comes from Elisa from France. And it's about working at the ECB. Let's hear directly from her.
Hi, I'm Elisa and I'm studying economics in Paris. And I would like to know how to work at the ECB. Are there any exams? Thank you for your answer.
Eglantine, you're responsible for making sure that the ECB attracts people with the most suitable set of skills and competencies and abilities. How does it work to start a career at the ECB?
So the first thing to understand is why would people join us to spend part of their career with us in Frankfurt? Well, there are some common denominators in all people working one day at the ECB. First, they understand our purpose and the role we play in uniting Europe and make it stronger. They want to also work in a truly international environment with people from all over the EU. And third, they're ready to take up challenges and grow in a stimulating environment. And then it very much depends on where you are in your career. So if you are recently graduated, you can join our traineeship program. Mm-hmm. To give you an idea, last year we welcomed 500 trainees across the entire organization.
Wow.
So it can be central banking, banking supervision, or horizontal functions, com, IT, HR. You can also join our graduate program. This is a perfect entry door to the organization, 2-year program where you rotate between 2 different business areas and you have a mentor and you have development opportunities and trainings offered by the organization.
Interesting.
And third, we also have regular recruitment campaigns for analysts, experts, again, across the entire organization, across our 30 business areas. And to give you an idea of the volume, last year we opened 69 campaigns to the external world. Wow. So quite a volume, and again, across a different set of skills. So there are in fact several ways to join the ECB, but they all start with connecting to our website under our career section, where every week we publish new openings and you can register as well to our job alerts.
And maybe you could also give a little hint how to make it through the recruitment process and answer the 100 million euro question, what does it take to get in?
So you will see in each vacancy notice that we publish on our career page, we provide the step-by-step process. It always starts with applying via our electronic recruitment system. And then if you are shortlisted, you normally go through a technical test online and an online interview with different people around the table. And around the table, there will be the recruiting business area, somebody from HR, and somebody from another business area. How to go through the process? For me, this is very important to stress. Preparation is key. You carefully have to read the requirements of the job opening, especially the essential requirements, because you will be asked whether you fulfill them. And you have to think very much about your motivation to apply, not whether you can do the job, but whether you want to do the job. And during the panel interview, one advice, stay yourself. It's for us to also understand who is the person behind the application. So authenticity is key.
I see. And so basically what you're saying, there is a wide range of possibilities to start a career at the ECB, but what kind of skills are you looking for?
So very wide range of skills. So at ECB, we value a strong mix of technical skills, but also interpersonal behavioral skills. So of course, if you're applying for an economist, risk management or finance-related position, you'll need a solid foundation in quantitative analysis, data interpretation, and problem solving. If you are looking for a communication role, strategic thinking and the ability to distill complex ideas into clear messages will be essential. But beyond these technical skills, and this is very important for the panel interview, you will be asked about your behaviors and your interpersonal skills. And here I'd like to highlight a few. Curiosity is very relevant in our organization. Having that drive to question, explore, and seek new ways of thinking. An appetite to learn and grow is equally important. We live in a fast-moving environment where staying adaptable is key. And then, needless to say, intercultural competence is adamant. The ECB is an incredibly diverse institution, bringing together people from all over Europe, different genders, different educational background, and to have this ability to navigate throughout different perspectives is essential.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, technical skills, behavioral skills, and when you go through an interview process, you will be asked about both.
Eglantine, I'm not in human resources, but as a communicator, I speak a lot with students at university in places like Maastricht and Navarra, Pescara, Luxembourg, but also kind of the College of Europe or closer to home, the Frankfurt School of Finance. And there's always huge interest in jobs at ECB. And I was just wondering, do we actually recruit at universities or go to job fairs?
So we don't per se recruit at universities because, as I said, everything is published on our website. What we do, though, is to go to career fairs and to universities fairs as well to explain what the ECB does, the type of skills we're looking for, and show what it is like to work in the ECB. And this is something which we've done a lot in 2024. In 2024, 24 career fairs were attended in 11 countries, and this is an effort that will continue in 2025. And here, it's not only HR people going. We go with the people from the businesses and explain very much to the students what we're looking for.
Interesting. So, Elisa, I hope all this answers your question, and if not, we hope to hear from you again. And for all our listeners, if you want to know more about how to join the ECB and have a career here, there is a lot of information, of course, on our website. If you go on the careers section, and of course, we will link this webpage in the show notes of this episode. We've talked a bit about working at ECB, but now we need to understand what are people at ECB actually working on. And we received a question from Ilham asking just that question. And my colleague from the podcast team, Daniel, will read it for us.
So the question we received is, how does the ECB's monetary policy affect small business and consumers in the euro area?
Very interesting question, because it really goes to the heart of what we're doing. Our job here at the ECB is to keep prices stable and banks safe. So how do we do that?
Yeah.
We want inflation, that is, the general increase in prices across the board, to be low, stable, and predictable, ideally around 2%. At that level, prices don't change so much. It's not really noticeable. And so people and businesses have a degree of certainty when they plan for the future, whether to invest in an extension of their business, whether to take out a mortgage to buy a house, or just to save for that latest mobile phone you've always wanted.
Okay, maybe you can give us a concrete example.
Sure. Imagine we are entrepreneurs and we have a garden center. And we now realize lots of people want to buy pots and plants. So we're planning to extend our greenhouse so that we can sell more and serve more customers. So we've calculated the cost of the building materials, the cost of the construction, how much additional staff would cost that we need to employ for that. We've calculated our future income that will come from then business extension, and we've calculated how big a credit we might need and how much that will cost. And we've come to the conclusion, yes, it's worth it, we will do that. Economically, it makes good sense. But, and here comes the but, if building materials suddenly become much more expensive, the energy to heat that new greenhouse becomes more costly, if you have to pay higher wages to attract the new staff, then the whole calculation suddenly might not work any longer. When prices are rising fast and in an unforeseeable way, this makes your planning and your investment much more difficult and uncertain. And you might end up not doing it. So this is how high and unpredictable inflation hinders investment and planning and ultimately the creation of new jobs and new wealth. Yeah. And that is also why our job of keeping inflation low helps ultimately our economy to work better for the benefit of all.
Yeah, but how precisely does the ECB do this, no? Because you cannot just tell people keep prices down.
Correct, absolutely. We can't do that. We keep prices stable by steering the interest rate. Now, what is that? That is commonly referred to, so to speak, the price of money or the price of credit in our economy. Sometimes, just think of a scenario, the economy is doing well, or maybe even too well, meaning lots of people have jobs. They have money they want to spend, they want to go out, they want to go travel, and businesses want to take advantage of that and they want to expand.
Sure.
But there might not be enough supply for all these goods and services that people want. Remember, there's only so many tickets for a Taylor Swift concert.
Yes.
And if too many people want to go, the only thing that goes up is the price.
Sure.
If that's what's happening across the economy, then we, as the ECB, can do something, and that is kind of to turn down the overall temperature in the economy. Yeah. If it's too hot, we can turn it down.
How do you do that?
That's, of course, the most concrete question here, and that is by raising the interest rate and making credit more expensive. What happens then? People who wanted to borrow money to buy that new car will find that it's now too expensive. And they might postpone that purchase or might end up not going to their Taylor Swift concert. Mm. They may also feel that it's worth putting extra money into the bank because now it pays more interest. And the entrepreneur might rethink whether to build that extension to the greenhouse that we've been discussing earlier. So that the fact that credit is more expensive influences millions of decisions by all of us out there in the economy, how we want to spend, save, borrow, or invest our money. And all in one direction, to cool down the economy. Yeah. And if the economy cools down, it becomes more difficult for companies to raise prices or workers to demand higher wages. And as a result, inflation comes down.
Okay.
So that's pretty much what happened in the past 2 years across Europe.
Yeah. And there's one aspect where I would like to add something, because what we do as an organization has an impact on businesses and on the people in Europe. The work that we do is not only important, but also purposeful. And here we regularly ask our ECB colleagues about how they feel about working at the ECB. And 85% of them say that they are proud to work for the ECB. 81% of them say that working at the ECB has a great deal of personal meaning to them. And similarly, 90% of them believe in the mission and purpose of the ECB. So this is very much part of our DNA as an organization, and we need people who are dedicated to work for Europe and for the citizens of Europe.
You're right, and it's certainly something that also drives me in my daily job. How about you, Gabriel?
Absolutely. I'm in there with those 85% it was, right? Yes. In the 26 years that I've been with the ECB, it's never been boring. We've always had new challenges. We've had, of course, repeated crises to cope with, new countries that join the euro, new ways to run our policy or explain it to the people, and also now preparing our money for the future, be it as a digital euro or with a new series of banknotes.
Yeah. But since you mentioned challenges, you'd be interesting to know that we had a question from one of our listeners. Unfortunately, we don't have the name, but the person asked, can the ECB withstand the global economic challenges we are facing in 2025? What do you think, Gabriel?
That's a tough one because there's just a lot of uncertainty involved. I mean, uncertainty is nothing new, but with war in Europe, with new conflicts elsewhere, likely confrontations over trade, problems with migration, disruptions from new technologies, populism, the effects of severe weather, climate change, the green transition, there's a lot coming together at this moment that will hit and affect our economy. It's just exactly how that's going to happen that we don't know.
Nobody knows. Yeah.
Absolutely. But going back to the question, it's not so much about whether the ECB can withstand these economic challenges. Our job, as mentioned, is to keep prices stable and banks safe. That's how we can best contribute so that Europe and its people can cope with what's coming our way. And to do that well, we first need to better understand what's going on in the economy, to be aware of the risks and see how they affect the economy and inflation, and how they change the relationships and numbers in our models and projections. Right now, we're seeing the first contours of the policies of the new US administration in terms of tariffs and geopolitics. What matters to us, of course, is how this will affect prices and inflation.
Yeah, and our president, Christine Lagarde, spoke about the impact of tariffs on inflation at the January 25 monetary policy press conference. Let's hear what she said.
As I said earlier on, for the moment, there is nothing that we can actually capture in terms of policy determination, in terms of numbers, in terms of scope, in terms of, custom line items to understand exactly what is considered. When that happens, then of course it will enter into our assessment and into the macroeconomic analysis that is produced by our staff. But it's far more complicated than it's this way or this way. It's inflationary or deflationary, depending on whether there is, one set of decisions with variable rates around the world, rerouting of trade, whether there is retaliation or not. All we know for sure is that it will have a global negative impact.
So, as the president said, tariffs can be inflationary, but also deflationary. It all depends on what they look like and who and what they target. Maybe to be a bit more concrete, take, for example, a tariff on energy like oil. That makes imported oil more expensive, but also with it, all the goods that use oil, such as chemicals, also cosmetics. But the ultimate impact depends on whether firms, for example, can switch to alternatives. For instance, solar power for energy generation or plant oils for cosmetics. If they can do so, and easily so, then prices might not go up by a lot. In the long run, tariffs can also have a deflationary impact.
Okay.
Because they can make trade and exchanges more difficult and expensive. And here comes the bad news, and that might force companies out of business and lay off workers, which then pulls down on economic growth and with it inflation. For the European economy, tariffs are likely to be negative. Our best course of action as Europeans is to stick together and work together. The European Union is an economy of around 450 million consumers. We can and must stand up for ourselves as Europeans.
Thank you for mentioning this positive aspect, Gabriel. I believe our chief economist, Philip Lane, has talked about that in our December episode. Let's hear what he had to say then.
There's a huge opportunity for Europe by working together, building a single market, cooperating on energy policies, building a capital markets union, improving the banking union. All of this will help Europe grow more quickly. Europe has many strengths. But we do think that there can be a kind of serious uplift in the potential of the European economy. And that is for the European community of policymakers, for people around Europe to think about and to work on. So essentially monetary policy can bring you ideally close to potential, but that potential is not a fixed number. It does depend on the wider policy choices in terms of investment, structural reform, education policies. And that's really, I think, where maybe the conversation needs to intensify.
So it's all about uplifting the potential of the European economy. We as ECB can advise. But the job of changing policies and convincing Europeans to support such change is with politicians, with governments and parliaments in the European countries and jointly in the EU. But from what we know about how the economy and the financial system work, we can recommend where policy action would have the most impact, where we will get most bang for our buck, so to speak. One such area would be to build a more unified capital market in Europe, which would make the EU an easier and more attractive place to innovate and for companies to scale up and be successful on a much broader scale.
So you're basically saying we can if we want, fantastic, but still that doesn't take away the uncertainty. How do we cope with that?
I think, Stefania, what we're talking about really here is resilience.
Okay.
Our ability to anticipate and cope with the challenges that are ahead. We simply cannot afford to fly half blind. We therefore have to work to refine our methods and use new technologies such as artificial intelligence to get a better and even more timely picture of what's happening in the economy, which after all is a hugely complex system. And this way we can identify risks early on, but also have an understanding how some risks are changing and prepare policy that can address those challenges.
And Gabriel, to add to that, I think there are two factors that massively support our ability to withstand and to respond to new challenges in the organization. First, having a workforce of highly skilled people. So recruiting people with new skills, preparing for the skills of the future. You mentioned artificial intelligence. This is, of course, one big pillar of our learning and development offer. And second, and this is also very important, having a diverse workforce. And by that I mean different academic backgrounds, different nationalities, different genders, different ways to look at the same issue or question. And here, our diversity of thought is what has helped us respond to new challenges.
Oh, thank you, Eglantine, for adding this part. And I hope this answered the original question about the challenges the ECB will have to face. And Gabriel, you also made the point about cooperation. And this brings me to our next question, which is on central bank cooperation. Tristan asked this question. Let's hear directly from him.
I'm Tristan. So my question is, how do you communicate between central bank? Thank you.
Eglantine, do you want to pick that up?
Yeah, I'll start with this one because before it comes to communication and cooperation between central banks, I want to stress how much exchanges there are already. So we have, of course, colleagues who have a background and who come from national central banks, national competent authorities. There are also a number of exchange programs with other national central banks or national competent authorities. So you can start at the ECB and then spend some months or some year in an NCB or an NCA. And you have also exchange program with other relevant organizations. I'll name only a few, the International Monetary Fund or the European Investment Bank. So as a central banker working for the ECB, you have the opportunity to spend some time in a national central bank or competent authority and benefit from this type of exchanges.
There are, of course, multiple channels, institutionalized, formal, informal, for central bankers worldwide and in Europe to talk to each other, to meet each other and exchange at all sorts of levels, top senior level all the way down to the working level. And that is, of course, especially true in the Euro system, the national central banks and the ECB here within the Euro area, but also beyond.
Yeah, and that's interesting, in fact, because we have a dedicated unit at the ECB who takes care of international cooperation. And our great podcast team visited them. Let's hear what they said.
Hello, I'm Christian from the ECB's International Cooperation Office, and I'm here together with my colleague Katerina. We enable cooperation between the ECB and other central banks in emerging markets and developing countries. But what does that mean? Katerina, maybe you can share an example of what you have worked on?
Sure, Christian. First thing that comes to my mind is that we brought together the decision makers from the ECB, 6 central banks from the Western Balkans, and also several EU national central banks to discuss payment systems. And why did we do this? Well, these countries aim to join the EU and are economically and financially closely linked with our economies. There is a very practical interest from both sides to see how we can best help the integration process and make it easier for citizens to transfer money between the two regions. We brought the right people together and also shaped the agenda.
Another example is that we welcome governors and board members from 10 African central banks to discuss the issue of climate change and policy responses with their peers from the Eurosystem. It was a lot of work, but truly worth the effort when you see the open discussion and also new perspectives coming to the table.
Yes, but we're not only working with top-level officials. We have requests really from everyone working in central banks. For example, we organized a discussion on central bank governance with colleagues from Southeast Asia and on risk management with colleagues from Latin America. More recently, the National Bank of Ukraine has become an important cooperation partner, and we naturally try to support them in the best way.
You see, we aim to bring central banks together to share their experience in an open and frank way. That helps all of us to do the job in a better way, and, if I may say, also strengthens the soft power of the ECB.
So, as you see, cooperation is really a priority. It's a key word here.
Yes, but there's much more going on, really. Take, for example, climate and nature-related financial risks. We as ECB, cooperate with 140 central banks and supervisory authorities from around the globe through a thing called the Network for Greening the Financial System. Our president regularly meets with other central bank governors at the meetings organized by the International Monetary Fund, like the spring meetings that are coming up in April. She and our executive board member Pierluigi Polona also attend the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors meeting. Next one will take actually in the next couple of days in Cape Town in South Africa.
Yeah.
Every 2 months, there are also meetings of the Bank of International Settlements, which is like the central banker's bank. And there are many more. And we ourselves also organize events where the wider central banking community can get together, such as our annual Forum on Central Banking in Sintra in Portugal. All of these are places to exchange, share assessments, and learn from each other's experience. But, and that's a very important point to make here, is what should be absolutely clear, that each central bank pursues their own policy and mandate in their own independence.
Yeah, independence is key, no, as we say.
Absolutely.
Tristan, I hope this answers your question, and if not, I'm sure we will hear from you. And to our frequent listeners, there is a moment now that is well known on the ECB podcast, because at this stage we don't let our guests leave without giving us a hot tip. Eglantine, Gabriel, what do you have for us today?
So, for all potential candidates, because it's easy to remember, we often refer to the 4 Ps. Preparation, meaning reading the website, knowing what type of work the organization does, looking at the job offer, practice before the interview, think of potential questions that you're going to be asked, people, use your network, connect with people that work in the ECB or that have gone through an interview process with us. And finally, and it's the most important one, purpose. Joining the ECB means serving the EU citizens.
Oh, thank you. Gabriel?
Well, it's my 4th time on the ECB podcast.
You're running dry. Huh?
So it's becoming more and more difficult. But going with the times, and where I think our listeners are likely to get their information from, I would like to point you to some fantastic resources of learning about the economy and why economic decisions matter on YouTube. Learning something can be entertaining. It doesn't have to be boring.
No.
It just has to be presented in the right way. After all, we are in this competition for attention, and to avoid that people just swipe away because things are boring, no?
Yeah.
And there are great channels out there that manage to do that, to make economics understandable and fun. For instance, from the International Monetary Fund, I like especially their Ask an Economist, or their Back to Basics, or their Charts in Motion videos. And we have a new kid on the block.
Yes.
Which is our own ECB Espresso Economics channel, which I can highly recommend. I especially like the Snap Economics section, which gives really useful advice for young people. Do check them out. Links are in the show notes.
Yes, lots of information in the show notes as usual. And Eglantine, Gabriel, thank you so much for joining us today and for your insights. And this brings us to the end of this episode. Thanks again to everyone who asked the questions. And please don't stop. Keep submitting your questions in the comments or on social media as you prefer. You've been listening to the ECB Podcast with Stefania Secola. If you like what you've heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. And in the spirit of Europe, I'd like to end in Slovenian today and say, Na svidenje. Until next time, thanks for listening.